needs no introduction, but I'll give him one anyway. Rajdeep Sardesai is the primetime anchor and consulting editor of the India Today group. In a journalistic career spanning over 3 decades, Sardesai has reported on some of India's most defining moments. His latest book, 2024, The Election That Surprised India, is both a rigorous explanation of the recent trends in Indian electoral politics, but also a searing indictment of the kinds of rot that plague Indian society, polity, and the media. Indeed, our interview today will focus on chapter 14 of his book, where we ask Rajdeep about the state of affairs in India's mainstream media, his emotions and his morality in an ecosystem where his spine sticks out like a sore thumb, his craft as a self-professed marked man in contemporary India, and the future of the field itself. Rajdeep, welcome to the Edict. It is an honor to be here.
First of all, thank you very much for having me here, Vishnu, at Ashoka University. And I guess it's not unusual that someone should read the last chapter first and say, I'm going to talk to you about chapter 14, which deals with the media. Maybe I need a separate book to be written on the media one day. But you're right, as a practitioner of the media, to write about my own tribe or profession in the wider context of its role in democracy and electoral politics, I think is something which is interesting, engaging, and maybe something which I can contribute a little bit more to.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting place to start, which is, you entered the field when there was one large shift in the media. You entered the field as television began to boom, and that sort of made your career, if you don't mind me saying. And at this stage in your career, we're also seeing another small, subtle shift in the media from the mainstream TV news ecosystem that we've been seeing for, say, the last 20 years or so, to content on YouTube and social media and sort of targeted journalism towards specific audiences. So I wanted to start there. It's a question that will get neither of us into trouble, and that's partially why I've started it. But also, I wanted to know what your reflections are on those two shifts, one at the start of your career, and one right now.
It's interesting you mentioned this, Vishnu. I started in journalism in 1988. Times of India, print. There was nothing remotely like private news television in this country. There was, there was just Doordarshan. So actually, when I remember making that transition 6 or 7 years later to television in the mid-90s, and it was really a leap in the dark. It was not even a leap of faith. It wasn't even as if I was. I actually genuinely believed that television was going to transform Indian journalism. But it did, for good and bad. I think it gave far more opportunities for you to be on the ground, to be reporting from different parts of the country and the world in a manner that print never did. I mean, legacy media, as print mainstream media was, never really gave journalists the kind of opportunity to be on the ground and be where the action is. It was very hierarchical. Television broke those hierarchies. It disrupted, in that sense, mainstream media as it was known then. And I think the same thing is happening now with digital media and YouTubers. They're disrupting journalism as we knew it. And maybe unlike in the mid-90s, now I'm too old to sort of completely adjust to this change. I mean, when I see a YouTuber sort of cross-legged, doing an interview with me and asking me all kinds of questions about the book without having read the book, and then says, don't even call me a journalist, I'm a content creator. It isn't easy to come to terms with it. And yet, I see he's got 2 million views, Samdesh, in the interview I did with him, compared to, let's say, if I did an interview with a normal journalist in mainstream media. So I guess there's, it is a changing ecosystem. And just like I think the mid-90s was important to disrupt the hierarchies of mainstream media, I think this is also important to disrupt the entire existing news ecosystem. So good luck to digital content creators, to influencers, to those who believe a sort of a tweet or an Instagram post or these long format podcasts will attract more audiences. Why not? I think in a country as diverse as ours, the only way to ensure that the media remains robust is to protect its diversity. And I think mainstream media has failed to do that in recent times. So it was important to shake the system up. And I think many of these young YouTubers have done just that. I worry about some of the elements of journalism in what they do. But, If there is an audience out there and the audience wants eyeballs, if there's some algorithm sitting in San Francisco which is deciding what you should watch, who am I to resist it? Having, as I said, been part of what I thought was the TV revolution, you're now seeing the digital revolution.
If I may just push back on that just a bit, which is that I think there is something to be said about the fact that TV news, despite being a revolution, still existed along the same continuum as print journalism, in the sense that I couldn't control what I read in the Hindu, and I can't control what I watch on India Today either. Right? There is a set of journalists that have their own journalistic standards that I need to sort of adapt to. That's not necessarily the case now, right? My YouTube feed, because of an algorithm that's decided to me, is Rajdeep Sardesai, is Karan Thapar, is journalists like Rajdeep Sardesai and Karan Thapar, because of who I am and because of what the algorithm has judged me to be. That's not necessarily the case in the sort of heyday of mainstream TV media, where on the same NDTV there was Rajdeep Sardesai, there was Arnab Goswami, and there was all sorts of people. Forget then. Tomorrow when you do an election, you're there and your co-anchor is there, and you both have different opinions on things. So is this revolution not along the same continuum in the same way the previous one was?
No, look, India has changed. I mean, technology is the biggest disruptor. Just think about the mid-1990s versus where we are today. The mobile phone is the biggest weapon that you have of mass distraction and destruction in a way. Everybody's consuming news at the moment on the mobile phone. That's not going to change. Everyone out there is potentially a citizen journalist who she can sort of put out the news or do a blog or write about it. Now, I still believe quality content can endure. It's just that the platform will completely change. It will depend on, you could put the same news on YouTube, on TV, write an article about it, and I think it is at one level complementary. I've written a book. If a YouTuber comes and talks about the book and we get 2 million views, it's good for the book, it's good for him, and I think it builds the news universe. The problem, of course, that I have is now you have 3 or 4 of these large social media sites who are controlling the narrative in their own way, who are not following the rules of journalism. I mean, for Mark Zuckerberg to say, I don't need the fact checkers anymore. So you're gonna, or YouTubers to put out sexually explicit content or content which is potentially hateful and insightful only so that I can get more clickbaits and eyeballs is dangerous, right? At least I was under some kind of legal scrutiny. If I sort of fucked up, there would be, criminal defamation cases that could be filed. What are you going to do against some anonymous algorithm or some engineer sitting in San Francisco? So I think there are serious problems with the world, with the news ecosystem as it stands today. But that's again something I think that we just have to. I don't think you can. There's no point fretting and fuming over it. I think we have to adapt to it and then try and see how we can make best use of this technology. To me, there is still space for a Lallan Top.
Yeah.
In Hindi, which is attracting large audiences and which is now doing much better journalism than mainstream Hindi news TV.
Yeah.
So there is space. It's just that, I think we have to embrace change rather than worry about it. I remember even in the 90s, since you mentioned that again, those who entered television looking down upon the medium never really were able to adjust to it. I would believe that those who sort of look at digital as some kind of a threat to mainstream media will not be able to work in this new ecosystem. You have to embrace digital media and find ways to be a multimedia professional.
So we'll come to the book now. So you've described this edition, your third book on elections in India, as the one where you're the most honest.
Yes.
And I swear I've read the entire book. I think chapter 14 is the one where that really comes through in terms of at an emotional level. And so I wanted to talk about that because you're critiquing an environment that you are a part of. It's not like, for example, somebody sitting in News Laundry or sitting and critiquing the same environment because they're third parties to it. These are your colleagues, these are people you meet at award shows. I don't mean colleagues in the sense of in the network. I mean, these are your contemporaries,
Peers, whatever.
your peers. And so when you write about scripted interviews with the PMO that are edited by the PMO, when you write about people sort of fanning hatred, I mean, is there a personal mental burden that you take on as a result because you feel maybe you don't feel, but
Vishnu, just a couple of points. Firstly, I think, since you mentioned that it's chapter 14 where the individual comes out and expresses his angst in a way more than the other chapters, that's perhaps because, look, I'm not part of the election commission, I'm not part of the ED, so I'm looking at it as an outsider. Here, I'm the insider. I still believe that those chapters are valuable because I think those are important to see as an observer. When I write about the media, I'm writing, you're quite right, as an insider. And to be very honest, I was actually conflicted. To what extent should I go to just sort of tell it as it is? And maybe that's why it needs another book at some stage when I've retired and I have no one to deal with in my newsroom and outside, no one to hold, no one that I am accountable to. But at the moment, I think it was important to tell the country what the broad state of the media is. I mean, all these scripted interviews, the manner in which small websites are targeted by enforcement authorities, what happened to I.N.D.I.A, just the role that those in power play in controlling the media, suspending journalists, this kind of sort of almost self-censorship that takes place, and of course the rise of digital media as a sort of alternative to those who are frustrated and angry with the way established media is working. So I think it's important to tell the story, and I think I tell it as I tell it with honesty. I think it's important to tell the media story with honesty, and if you do, I think even those within the media appreciate it, because I know people within the media who have come out and said thank you for saying what you have, because I think most people just want to break free. It's like we are caged. The Supreme Court, I think, once referred to the CBI as a caged parrot. We are caged. I'm not going to use an animal analogy that will get me into trouble, but we are caged and we want to desperately break free. Lots of young reporters desperately want to break free, want to experience what freedom of saying what you want without fear is. So, that's the aim of that chapter. And my worry, and the way I link it to, to the wider electoral process, is it doesn't allow for a level playing field. I mean, if the questions are only going to be asked of the opposition and not the ruling party, if those in power get away with lies, with half-truths, it undermines and weakens democracy.
And has it specifically, do you think, affected your craft, being what you are in the ecosystem that you are? For example, you were the only primetime anchor that did a show on Manipur day before yesterday, after the resignation. And so, just how has it altered sort of your practice?
It has, Vishnu, you're now coming to an existential dilemma that I've suffered. For the last few years, I've sort of lived with the idea. I have colleagues of mine who've left the medium who say, you're compromised. And I go home and it tortures me, when people who will tell you that you've compromised with the system. I have tried not to compromise with the system. I have tried to fight from within the system, and I believe that's important. I mean, you can just vacate the space tomorrow otherwise and say, look, I don't want to be part of this media ecosystem at all. I'll be a YouTuber. Maybe if I was 25, I would have done that. At 60, I feel it's important to try and preserve some of the finer qualities of what news was meant to be. You mentioned Manipur. I mean, it's outrageous, the fact that Manipur has received so little coverage broadly in mainstream TV media. Newspapers have done a bit better, but by now every news channel should have, at least for the last 1 year, have had a permanent correspondent in Imphal. In my view, that's what you would have done, because that's where news is happening. President's rule, I think, is being declared as we speak today. So that's my concern, is that do we all withdraw from these spaces because they've become so toxic and we can't, we're unable to maybe I will. I mean, let me hold. I've come back after 2 months sabbatical of sorts, and who knows, if I can't adjust anymore when you're reaching 60 in a few months, you can always do other things, and I'm open to that. But I think it's important to stay and fight the good fight in terms of ensuring that at least you can put out the news that you believe strongly in. And to be fair, India Today has not stopped me from sort of saying what I think on Manipur or putting my facts out there. The day they do, we'll find something else to do. I mean, I'm okay about that. But you're right. I think this is an existential dilemma that a lot. I feel sorry for younger journalists. I've seen some good days. The younger journalists who today find these pressures at times way too much, having to conform all the time. I think it is troubling for them.
All right. So we're incredibly short on time. So we'll
Now
have
you can
to
ask
end,
one final question.
In the interview there, I think you have to go and give your book talk. And I do strongly encourage everybody to buy a copy of Rajdeep Sardesai's latest book, 2024, The Election That Surprised India. Rajdeep, thank you so much for joining us on the
Vishnu,
Edict.
thank you very much. You need a haircut.
I know. We'll talk about that later.